Have you ever thought, oh, I wish I had the energy of my youth? Or, I've got to lose that extra 10 pounds I've been carrying. Or, gee, what could I do to get in an exercise program again? If you've ever thought those thoughts, you're in the right place. I want to invite you to join us in discussing and considering some profound ideas, principles that can not only change your health, but change your life. So stay tuned right now. You're about to hear Health is More Than Health Care.
Welcome to Health is More Than Healthcare with Greg Anderson. Join us for a fascinating exploration of the complete definition of health and well-being. It's all about our role as active participants in our health and what we can do to get well and stay well. Now, meet our guide and coach, Greg Anderson, 24-year survivor of stage 4 lung cancer, best-selling author of 11 books, and founder of the Cancer Recovery Foundation group of charities. He's an international award-winning authority on wellness who practices what he preaches. Please welcome Greg Anderson.
Thank you. To you. Oh, welcome. Welcome to you. It's such an honor. I'm so pleased that you're here today with us. And, I would submit that you've come today in part because we share a quest. And that's what this Health is More Than Healthcare is all about. It's really a quest not only for better health, but also really for a better life. And I think the two are inextricably, do you like that word? Linked. And in order to understand the dimensions of health being more than healthcare, we're going to explore some really profound things. We're going to talk about health and vitality. We're going to talk about the mind and the body. And we're going to talk about even things like faith and its connection with health. And so really, I'm asking us to expand our definition of health. I want us to think new thoughts, great thoughts together. Now, there's only 3 ground rules in this whole series this is part of a series of 6 different shows. And there are only 3 ground rules. And the first one, listen carefully. Don't listen to me. Think with me. Think with me. I don't want this to be one of those times when, it's just more entertainment. I want us to understand how important it is, the issues that we're speaking of. Second thing, I see some of you ready to take notes. I tell you, if you're going to take a note, don't take notes about what I say. Take notes about what you think. Are you with me? That's very important. Just take notes about your insights into some of these principles. And then really the third ground rule here is this is not about my story. Our hearts and our minds are here about your story to help you make health something greater than you ever thought possible. So we're going to help everybody to think and feel and live better than we ever thought possible. There's our goal. That's our objective. I always like to get started with something kind of funny, and I recently heard about this couple that he went to the doctor. It was his appointment, but his wife accompanied him. And after the appointment, after the workup and everything, the doctor said to the wife, "Could you step aside here for a moment? I need to talk to you." He said, "Mrs. Jones, your husband has SSS, severe stress syndrome. And if you don't do exactly what I say, he'll surely die." "What can I do, doctor?" He said, "Well, the first thing you need to do is every day fix 3 just exceptionally healthy and delicious meals. Prepare them from scratch. That's real important. Second thing is, I want you to make sure there's no stress on him. Don't bring him problems, don't bring him chores, and whatever you do, don't nag. This is really important. And then the third thing is I want you to be exceptionally affectionate to him. And frankly, I want you to make love whenever he wants to." Mrs. Jones kind of nodded and walked away, and they walked to the car silently. Finally in the car, The husband said, "Well, what did the doctor say, dear?" "Honey, he said," the wife responded, "you're gonna die." You know, part of what we're talking about is health care globally, and we need to talk about that for a moment. I want us to settle on some definitions. We have these things, I call them the health circles. And the health circles are really about the idea that there are really three ways to understand health care. Number one would be that there's health at the top. And that really has to do with what a patient can do for themselves. It has to do with the result, if you will, of taking care of oneself and of health care. Health care is the part of delivering. This is in the doctor's office, so to speak. And the third part would be health care financing. And I want to tell you, around the world, most of the activity about health care is all about the health care providers being told by the health care payers, the financiers, how to improve quality and lower costs. Who's being left out of the discussion? Yeah, the patient. And part of this, a key part of this series of programs is to understand all that we can do. Well, I came by this out of pure personal need. And I'll briefly tell the story. In 1984, I was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer, stage 4. And I actually had a surgeon say, "Greg, the tiger is out of the cage. Your cancer has come roaring back, and I would give you about 30 days to live." Just as a point of perspective, that was December of 1984. So when I say it's an honor to be with you here today, I mean that in many number of ways, you know. Yeah. So, by the way, I've had people over the years say, "When did you realize you'd live more than 30 days?" On the 31st day is when I realized that. Part of what we did is, and when I say we, I'm mostly many times talking about my wife, Linda, and I. I would not be here today without this woman's help. And part of what we did is to go searching for people who had lived even though they had been told that they were going to die. And I started from a spare bedroom with a telephone searching for people. I started with the oncologist. "Can you get me in touch with just one person who I might be able to talk to?" They couldn't. You know, they couldn't find somebody with a similar diagnosis. So finally I was directed to a Southern California cancer center. And they said, it's amazing. I remember talking to the woman. I said, "Karen," metastatic lung cancer, been given 30 days to live. There's nothing more that can be done in terms of treatment. I'd like to talk to just one survivor." Listen to her words. "One survivor," she said. "Okay, but how many more would you like to talk to?" What's my point here? This is particularly true for those of you who are in nursing. You know, the whole issue of 30 days to live, tiger out of the cage, created this sense of pessimism and doom. Here on the other end of the line was Karen. "How many survivors would you like to talk to?" Oh my, big difference, huge difference. And so I would just encourage all of us, whether we're medical professionals or not, you know, it is not appropriate to ever, nobody knows how long somebody has to live. Isn't that true? You really don't. In part because we can never predict a patient's response or the true course of an illness. We went searching, and we went searching. This started a process, and over the years we've interviewed over 16,000 survivors of illness. These are the people who have been told that there was no hope, yet they lived. And after a few years, it became apparent there were some patterns. And today it's we call it our pyramid, our wellness pyramid. Shortly after I started this, I was almost forced to attend a seminar. And it was a seminar put on by a tightrope walker. Now, of all the seminars I've ever been, that did not sound good. I fought against God. Well, what in the world could somebody like that teach me? Oh, everything. This gentleman told about his family had been part of, this has been their career for years. This is their business. And not only did they do it on different entertainment venues, but these were some of the people who would string, they call it the wire, between buildings. Have you seen that sort of thing? And have these long balance poles. And he said, I am here to tell you how not only to walk a wire, but to succeed at whatever you wish. And he said, it is all about one word: focus. 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 He went on to tell the story, and here he was up on stage, and he had one of these things, and he said, the whole issue is to focus on the next step, the next section of rope. The problem is, the problem is the mind. Because when you're up on a wire between two buildings, you start to think about other things. You start to think about, I'm a long ways up here. Goodness, that ground is a long ways down there. And all of a sudden the focus goes from the next step to all the problems. He said typically there's wind at that level, and you think, oh, it's windy. And all of a sudden you find yourself, just that thought, that very thought, all of a sudden it will trigger an imbalance. And he said, there's noise. It's just amazing on how much noise, how distracting that can be. Finally, he said, the last three steps are the key to the entire effort. And he said, a lot of people get in trouble because they take their mind off the last three steps and put the focus on the platform. What in the world does that have to do with health and health care? A great deal. Here's the most important part of this whole series. I'm asking you and all the people who are watching, I want you, in addition to medical care, to put your focus on creating wellness, not on fighting illness. Well, let me repeat that. That's hugely important. Now, did you hear me say in addition to, not in place of, conventional medicine? I have a great doctor, but he said some profound truths. He said, what do? I see you what? Once, twice, a year, 10, 15 minutes at a time. He said, I can only guide. Your health is built day to day by the choices you make. And that's a profound message for all of us. So the idea is, are we creating wellness or are we fighting illness? We've helped cancer patients for years, and that whole issue is constantly a challenge for people because it's so easy to just fight the illness and forget about all the things we can do. Well, we created this pyramid, and here's all the things that we can do. You know, the very first thing is this whole issue of medical care, and we do, again, indicate that this is all in addition, not in place of traditional medicine. But then there are some other issues that we need to focus on. And the second would be nutrition, which we'll have more to say. Each of these will be covered in one of the segments. Nutrition, and you'll hear us talk about a simple nutritional strategy that's hugely powerful and can help us use nutrition really as medicine. You'll also hear us talk about social well-being. That's our relationships. It's not only relationships with a spouse or a child, but it's relationships with ourselves. And even here today, right now, we have a relationship. You also hear us talk about attitudinal well-being. This is the mind-body connection. And we will focus on what the mind can contribute and what it cannot contribute and how we can use it to our maximum. Vocational wellness. This isn't job, but it's a sense of meaning and purpose seen beyond just the day-to-day. And then, of course, as we interviewed all these survivors, it didn't surprise us. What was at the base of it all? Oh, yeah, a spiritual journey. That health, particularly for somebody coming through a healthcare crisis, the spiritual dimension has a profound impact on health and well-being. Well, let me stop here a moment. Does that make sense? Huh? Does that expand one's, understanding that health is more than just some cell biology? I would submit that it greatly expands it. And in fact, there's a fair amount of research that would say that some of these things actually impact very significantly cell biology. And that's a profound statement, one that is constantly overlooked. So part of health is more than health care, is to help us understand. We'll go through some of the things that we can actually do to improve our health. I would just say in brief on this that the message really is one that the survivors that we've interviewed, they make shifts in their life, make shifts in these areas. And I think it's fair to say the shifts are in proportion to what you see in the pyramid. And so the message really is, is this a time for you to consider making that shift? Or from a professional perspective, is this something that I should also have as a part of my professional protocol? Well, I'm pleased today that we have with us some real experts. And the first one I would like to introduce is Dr. Jan Sidorov. Jan is an internist by training and practice, and now, Jan, you've devoted yourself to disease management and all the things that involves. When you see something like this, what comes to mind, and what should the shifts be that a patient ought to make?
Absolutely. As a doctor, one of the things that I've found makes such a big difference in a person's ability to cope, not only cope, but thrive, not just survive, but move forward in this kind of journey, is a sense of education. People need to know what they're up against and be as aware as they can be of what's going on and what they need to do. Secondly, they need to be engaged. They need to be a member of the team, just like the relationship that you have with your physician. It sounds like it's not a doctor-patient relationship.
It's not a passive relationship,
right.
John.
I'll bet you're a handful.
That would be true.
and then the third thing is a sense of optimism, hope for the future, and being willing to look at the future not in a crazy, overly optimistic kind of way, but on the other hand, not in a surly kind of way. There's a right balance in there, and that's what I think your pyramid talks to. Having the right balance and putting everything into proportion and using that to deal with illness and achieve health.
Jan, in your opinion, in the people that you interact with, where are most patients in terms of trying to adopt this sort of stance?
It's hard to know in terms of statistics and who has what kind of attitude, but generally, too many people, in my opinion, are just passive bystanders in managing the illness and not thinking about health. Fortunately, I believe, because of efforts of folks like you, as well as a growing realization in the medical community, that formula is substandard. I'd say there's definite growth in the number of people that are partners in their health care.
Yeah. How many of your patients do any sort of exercise, do you think?
Huh.
Oh, that's an answer, isn't it?
Very few? Less than a third. Depends on your definition of exercise.
Less than a third.
But the kind of exercise that people ought to do, 5 days a week, enough to sweat, 20 to 30 minutes at a time, a distinct minority.
Yeah. And it's a simple thing that virtually everybody can do, really no matter what the health condition. I started exercising actually sitting in a chair doing the backstroke motions. Do you remember that? I'd do 10 forward, 10 back. And I started that routine. And today there's just not I'm a walker. And I'll walk 20, 30 minutes and I'll do this burst in between and then slow down, burst, slow down. And I believe exercise has been just central. Maybe as important as conventional medicine. Yeah. We have with us an exercise a person who appreciates exercise, Robert Gunther, survivor extraordinaire. Robert, we're so pleased you're with us today.
Thank you, Craig.
Share with us some of your insights into not only surviving but thriving.
Well, when I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer of the small intestine in the fall of 2006, I had the endoscopy one day. The next day I was in surgery. By the end of the week I was a cancer survivor. When I woke up in bed, I had 2 IVs, a catheter, a tube down my throat, and as soon as I could get out of the bed, I started walking around the hallway in the hospital. And I must have been a sight, in those hospital gowns, the back flapping open, and the IV pole dragging along beside me. But I started walking then, and I haven't stopped. And every morning I went through 6 months of chemotherapy, and with the pump on, with the chemo port, I kept walking, and I just felt it was something that I really needed to do. And no doctor ever told me to do this, which just surprised me, because there is that, and no one ever talked to me much about nutrition. And I want to say that I've been really blessed to have a great team of doctors to work with. Wonderful surgeon, wonderful oncologist, great nurses, very compassionate. But this is a piece of the puzzle that medicine just doesn't really pay a lot of attention to.
Robert, I'm assuming you would be a great proponent of what is kind of known in the patient-client, doctor-patient relationship, I should say, as shared decision-making. Yeah? You just talked about exercise and diet. Have you taken a more active role in other areas as well?
Yeah, I think you have to see the people that you work with as your real partners. And they don't always encourage you to do that, but I think it's really essential. And you have to recognize that a lot of healing happens outside of medical care. And I think in our society, especially consumer society, we think all the answers are out there. If I get the right drug, the right doctor, I will be healthy. And a lot of it is inside. And you look at things like the placebo effect. Good science is you ignore the placebo effect. You factor it out of your experiments. But the placebo effect accounts for about 30% of recoveries. And Herbert Benson, in his book, Relaxation Response, says it could be as high as 50 to 90% in some cases. That's huge. Good science is to ignore that because you want to see whether the pill works better than the sugar pill. But good medicine, you can't ignore that. And so when I did my 6 months of grueling chemotherapy, what they promised me was 12 to 14% better survival and remission rates at the end of this. 12 to 14%. And over here we have 30%, maybe 50 to 90%. And you think, well, shouldn't we be paying attention to that piece of it? Isn't that where we should put more of our hope?
Fascinating, Robert, fascinating. An experience that is shared by many. Jan, tell us, medicine, science, art. What is it?
The best way I would try to sum it up is the adage that hope is one of those medically necessary treatment options.
Ooh, that's profound. Isn't that good, everybody? That's really excellent. Say it again. Hope is
medically necessary.
Medically necessary. So that not only mixes science and art, but also faith, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate an MD's take on something like that. Well, okay, now what did we learn here? What did we learn here today? Well, I hope that the first thing that we discovered is that there is a paradigm, if you will, that goes well beyond just traditional medicine, and that health is a factor of all of these things. That's hugely important, particularly for the patients. And then, on top of that, I hope that we gave some direction in terms of here are some ideas, some simple ideas that you can use and implement yourself to get well and to stay well. But more than anything else, you ought to take away from this that if you're the patient, you need to get involved. This is your show. Who's the most important person on a patient's healthcare team? Is it the doctor? No. In all due respect to our students here today, is it the nurse? No. And some people give up that way too quickly and just say, oh, doctor, fix me. That's not appropriate. And so getting involved, understanding that the patient's role is one of being very active, being very centrally involved in health and health care. Well, for those of you who are watching and have been part of this, we never like to close without giving you an invitation to do something proactive to help you improve your health and enrich your life. If you'll go to the website that you see on the screen right now, or call the toll-free number, you'll be connected just with a myriad of resources. And I'd like to invite you to do that right now. Be one of those who take an active part in your health and in your healing. I tell you, the promise is great. It will not only change your health, it'll change your life. And you'll prove that health is much more than health care. Thank you, everybody.